Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Yusuf Aram. Could Libya reignite into the region's next geopolitical flashpoint? After the fall of the Assad regime in Syria, Russia was left without a key ally. Syria's new rulers reportedly canceled the port deal with Moscow, forcing it to draw down its decades-long presence on the eastern Mediterranean. However, reports are emerging that those forces are now shifting west to Libya. Plagued by political instability, Libya desperately needs investment and international support to end its deadlock and continue on its journey to hold free and fair elections. Turkish oil giant TPAO has proposed a multi-billion-dollar investment to revive Libya's struggling petroleum sector. The potential deal would build on existing energy and security agreements between Ankara and Tripoli. This latest proposal comes as Libya's foreign backers set aside past rivalries to stabilize a region rocked by the war in Gaza. Relations between Cairo and Ankara have seen significant progress after key high-level visits last year. But with Russia intensifying its presence in North Africa, is the region set to see more volatility? And how does the Trump administration view what's happening in Libya? For more, joining me now from London is Jonathan Gittins-Mazer. He's a North Africa analyst and a former professor at Exeter University. Also from London, Tim Eaton, a senior research fellow at Chatham House, and from Istanbul, Ferhat Polat, a researcher at the TRT World Research Center. Gentlemen, thanks for joining me. Libya, an issue that we haven't talked about for a while, especially with the developments in Gaza, with the developments in Syria, war in Ukraine. Libya's kind of been put on the back burner. Jonathan, what's the current situation right now?
I think we can say that Libya is in a bit of a holding pattern. We wait to see what happens in Ukraine because Libya has become a chess piece in the wider global great power competition at the moment. The international powers, whether that's the West, the EU, the US, particularly Russia, all wait to see what shakes out in Ukraine before committing to find a solution for Libya itself. And this is much to the dissatisfaction, I think, of the Libyan people, and additionally, much kind of adds a great deal to their suffering, where there's the constant threat of a new civil war to break out there.
Tim, Jonathan highlighted the war in Ukraine. There's also a lot of developments in Syria, obviously, with the ousting of Bashar al-Assad, a new administration in Syria as well. Are both of these conflicts impacting Libya? Which one's impacting Libya more?
Well, certainly both impacting Libya. And I think what it reflects is that some of the players who are engaged in Libya are key players in those conflicts. Of course, the key question that's emerged from Libya's perspective, from the Syria question, is what happens to Russia's forces? What happens to Russia's foothold in the Mediterranean? And a lot of speculation about what's been moved and what the counterpunch might be. So in that sense, there's a clear knock-on from what's happened in Syria. But I think perhaps looking more broadly, what we've seen in recent years is that as opposed to any kind of cohesive international position emerging over Libya, we've seen individual countries forming their own partnerships and their own relationships. So the Russian relationship in eastern Libya has been growing for some time. That was already a concern of the Americans and something that the Americans have been pushing back against. And in Tripoli, the government of national unity has remained in place largely because of its ability to maintain key relationships with Turkey, with the United Arab Emirates. So Libya is certainly a chess piece across this board, as Jonathan mentions. And I think it plays a different role on different players' boards. But at the moment, it's not the priority on anyone. So in this sense, it's feeling some of the ripple effects, and it's not quite clear what effects on the ground that will have in Libya, apart from we're not seeing any real movement in a political process or any real sense that political change is coming. So the players on the ground in Libya are trying to maintain their relationships and insulate themselves from the impact of other conflicts.
Ferhat, it seems that both of our previous guests, Jonathan and Tim, agree that there is a deadlock. Does that deadlock play into the hands of the people who are ruling Eastern and Western Libya? Are they happy with that current situation? Because I want to talk about the foreign backers in a little while, but does Eastern Libya and Western Libya want to solve this issue right now?
The key factors prolonging this Libyan stalemate, a lack of national agreement on country's future and vision. And a key driver of this dispute is how to control of the oil fields and revenues from oil. So those with vested interest in the status quo, like armed groups and war profiteers, including foreign fighters, some of those fighters even controls oil fields, terminals in the eastern part of the country, which is pretty much under control of Khalifa Haftar. And they benefit from this political stalemate, and they have no or even less incentive to compromise, and because they benefit from this political stalemate and they increase their profit through this war. But certainly, ordinary Libyans are the ones who are affected from this ongoing conflict between East and West.
Okay, well, let's dissect the foreign players one by one. I think let's start with Russia. Now, obviously, war in Ukraine occupying Moscow's mind. But at the same time, developments in Syria freed up assets, and it looks like Russia's moving them from Syria to Libya. So, Jonathan, do you think that Russia will have a more outsized role in Libya due to the developments? Is Libya now more of a priority for the Kremlin?
There's no doubting the fact that already Russia has a sizable footprint. Looking at the air bases in Benghazi, the naval port in Benghazi, a moment of trying to find an accommodation for a Russian interest is over. The Russian interest is simply present. It could be that it has a historical root. We know at Yalta, actually, Stalin wanted Benghazi as opposed to Kaliningrad in the Baltic. And if we think that Putin is going by a motto of make Russia great again, maybe this represents in some ways a return to history for him. But the reality is that Russia sees Libya as a key component for Mediterranean influence. It sees Libyan oil as a key component of energy encirclement for EU. When we think about it regionally in terms of the deep links between Algeria and Russia, which already exist, we can see that Russia really wants to be able to influence certainly Mediterranean security, if not European security, by control over oil and natural gas resources, because it can literally turn on or off the pipe if it has that kind of influence for Southern Europe and really deeply affect European security.
Tim, what's Russia's endgame here? Does it want to see reunification and free and fair elections, or is it happy with the status quo right now?
I think the Russian approach over the last decade has largely been focused on where can they get the most return for their investment. And they focus particularly on Eastern Libya. And that foothold in the Mediterranean is very important to the Russians and brings a real strategic benefit, as Jonathan's laid out. But of course, it also provides a gateway into the Sahel and Africa more widely, something where the Russians have been expanding dramatically in recent years. So Libya, in that sense, is part of a broader strategy. In terms of what Russia wants in Libya, well, this is where sometimes their efforts have come up against some opposition, because in recent times they've effectively been accused, if you like, of seeking to support Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, the son of the former dictator, for his candidacy to return to power in Libya. And that is actually against the interests of their military partner, Khalifa Haftar. So that's caused some real tension, particularly in recent months, where Haftar's forces fear a re-emergence of the Gaddafis as a power, and have tried to shut down any indications that elements of their forces might make that move. So in that sense, Russia has been quite clear in trying to be a military backer for Haftar. Haftar is now playing them off against the Americans, who are trying to bring the Haftars in under their fold and talk about military reunification. So there's a dual nature to this, with the Russians seeking to play Haftar and the others off against each other for Russian interests, and Haftar seeking to play the Russians off against the Americans to get the most bang for his buck and not become beholden to just one external state.
Farhat, let's talk Turkey now, another country that's been engaged in Libya for a while. A lot of military assistance early on during that dialogue with Western Libya that turned into a maritime agreement, culminated in that agreement. Now, that military assistance kind of turning more towards economic assistance, political support, talk of a possible energy deal going forward. What does Ankara want out of Western Libya, and what is Ankara's endgame in Libya altogether?
Turkey, in this sense, has been playing a role to, help international recognized governments, now Government of National Unity, before Government of National Accord. And particularly, Turkey became quite a reliable partner for international recognized government in 2020, when Khalifa Haftar started his offensive against the international recognized government, and Turkey prevented. Since then, there is a ceasefire, which we haven't witnessed any major armed conflict, which is good sign. But since then, it's a frozen conflict. And Turkey is not only supporting Western Libya, also trying to seeking any kind of connection with eastern part. Even the recent development shows that Turkish Airlines resumed its flights from Istanbul to Benghazi. And Turkey is also planning to open its consulate in Benghazi, which is another good sign. And Turkey wants to train Libya's forces to have a standing army. I think Libya currently facing one of the main obstacles, I believe, security. Without having a security across the country, there is no way to hold elections, or if there is any attempt to quick fix like holding elections won't work. So Turkey is having long-term plans in Libya. First of all, stability. It's essential in Libya in order to talk the trade and economic interest in Libya. And Turkey has a bit different approach than some other countries like Tim Eaton and Jonathan mentioned, like Russia. Russia is a bit more opportunistic in Libya, wants to increase its footprint in Libya and in Sahel, and since 2015. But Turkey has long-standing economic relationships since 1970s, during the Gaddafi era. Before the uprising happened, Turkey had around 20 billion US dollars of trade. So stability is essential for Turkey, and Turkey wants to see unified Libya rather than divided regions.
Okay. So, Jonathan, Farhat's saying Turkey is in this for the long game. Over the past year or so, we've seen some type of dialogue between Turkey and Eastern Libya. Are you surprised by that dialogue?
Not at all. I think, nature abhors a vacuum. There's been a real vacuum of leadership in terms of trying to find a solution to the, Libya is a state on the precipice of total failure. And I think Turkey has really tried to step in and play a constructive role, both economically and politically, where France, the US, the UK, the EU hasn't really seemed to be able to deliver meaningful political results in that kind of way, despite their efforts. So, I think there is most probably a degree of pullback from some other international powers, allowing Turkey to take the lead, to move forward on this. It is very much to Turkey's, of course, economic advantage, but also political advantage. A safe Mediterranean and a profitable Mediterranean, of course, is of great, meaningful political, international influence and economic boon to Turkey. So I think, it is a it is a role played by Turkey to try and make a meaningful difference in Mediterranean security.
Tim, let's talk about the European Union now. Obviously, the EU suffering from irregular migration, Libya a source of that irregular migration at times. What role can the EU play going forward in Libya besides just trying to curb migration? And is it interested in playing a big role?
I think it is interested in playing a role, but clearly, as your question, I think, accurately states, the primary goal has been to reduce irregular migration as a political initiative to reduce the amount of dissent across the European Union. This is a major point of popular dissatisfaction in many countries across the EU. So that has been the foremost goal. The question, I think, is what the EU can do in a more forward-leaning sense. And I think this is where the absence of a clear coalition among Western states to supporting, for example, the UN and a political process is notable. I think that the EU could do more to be out front in that, more to support. And frankly, I think it needs to rethink some of its medium and long-term strategy, because ultimately, by prioritizing the reduction of irregular migration at all costs, that's meant ongoing relationships with the actors that are actually frustrating some of that political progress, most notably armed groups, but armed groups that are affiliated to the Libyan state. And perhaps one perfect encapsulation of this what happened a couple of weeks ago when a Libyan armed group commander was arrested under an ICC warrant in Italy, only to be released back to Libya. Mm-hmm. That seemed to show that Italy and other European states are place more emphasis in maintaining their relationship with armed groups and managing the situation than they do in terms of changing the situation and supporting some form of political transition.
Okay. Farhad, I want to talk about Egypt as well, another very important country. What exactly is Egypt looking for now in Libya? Obviously, the security situation inside the country, very concerning for Egyptians. And also, this recent warm wave of diplomacy between Turkey and Egypt, can that reflect positively on Libya as well?
Absolutely, it will impact very positively. And as you mentioned, Egypt's interest in security, its borders, alongside with Libya, has provided facilitated terrorist activities and illicit activities increased. Egypt is overly concerned about security as well as economic interest. And before 2011, many Egyptians used to live in Libya and generate a source of income to send back home, which is another, reason why Egypt is interested and wants to also have cheap oil transfer from Libya to Egypt. And there are a number of economic reasons and geostrategic interest, as well as security interests. With reconciliation with Turkey, and of course, has positive impact on the ground, because these two countries, they support different factions, and Turkey is supporting internationally recognized government. Egypt used to support, I still continue to support, but some extent they reduced to provide all kind of support for Khalifa Haftar and alongside with United Arab Emirates. If they reach or if they, put differences aside and find a way to work together on the Libyan case, I think it will bring some positive impact on the ground. Mm-hmm. And thanks to them, I think there is no major armed conflict since 2020, because no one is interested to support relieving of conflict in Libya currently.
Jonathan, probably for the past 2 months, I can't remember doing a show without asking about the Trump impact on whatever issue it is. So I'm going to do it to you. What about Trump?
I mean, the problem with analyzing the Trump impact is it's always unpredictable, because we don't always quite know what policy goes from one day to the next. I think there was a lot of anticipation that Ukraine would be the first issue dealt with. Obviously, that's not been the case. And I would have thought, if you'd asked me 2 months ago, that once that domino fell, there would be some form of accommodation found between the Russian interests in Libya, U.S. desires, because it's difficult to really identify what is the U.S. interest in Libya. We can talk about U.S. objectives there, but in terms of interests, I think that's almost overstating the case. My greatest concern is that Trump will look at Libya and see it as a trading piece to do the deal in Ukraine and cede it over to Russian influence. I think from my perspective, that makes Turkey's presence even more important in Libya at the moment, as one of the only really remaining well-placed, honest brokers to help the Libyan people find a meaningful political accommodation. If we go back to what I said before in terms of nature abhorring a vacuum, Turkey has obviously taken up that space of political influence, particularly in its support of the Tripoli-based government and other institutions there. But I think that's really the one barrier that will allow it to control and impact what otherwise might be Trump's desire to rid himself of the Libyan problem by trading it for a Ukrainian peace deal.
Mm-hmm. Tim, does the United Nations still have a role to play in Libya?
It certainly does. And look, we've just had another special representative appointed. The UN in December announced a multi-track process. It is beginning those deliberations. It's formulated a committee to seek to navigate the challenges towards elections. The UN still does have a very important mandate and is able to mediate among all of the parties. I think what it comes down to, though, is what kind of accommodation is being sought. Is it a deal effectively between those at the top, between the power brokers in the east and west, the Haftars and the Dbeibas? The form of that is already been seen in recent years, where we've seen increasing corruption, increasing state spending as those elites have kind of consolidated their power. That unfortunately offers a very grim future for Libya because of the amount of money that's wasted and captured by those individuals. The UN offers a slightly different direction in terms of seeking a consensus over what comes next.
Farhat, in Syria, they're talking about having elections 3 years down the line, whether that's realistic or not. At least there's a roadmap, at least there's some type of schedule. When you look into a crystal ball for Libya's future, do you see any type of roadmap for elections being held? And also, what type of steps do you foresee in the next year or two to at least try to bring Libya together?
Current dynamics shows elections are not silver bullet to solve remaining issues. And if United Nations or international community rush into holding elections, let's say next month, it won't solve any existing issues, because then losing sides may not accept the result, and which even could create further deepening conflict in Libya. So in order to hold elections in Libya, especially any countries after post-conflict, you need to provide sort of security and also provide right conditions to hold elections. Right now, Libya has lots of different and lacking process. For instance, there is no constitution, there is no election law. How gonna hold such elections in a country where even polarization is so high, and also some candidates like Saif Islam al-Qaddafi and Haftar and these kinds of candidates also are whether will be accepted by Libyans or not. So there are lots of issues. But in order to hold elections, first of all, there is a urgent need of state institutions. Building state institutions is crucial. First one is security and military institution. And in order to have that, you need to unify the militia groups in a standing army. Without having such conducive environment, I think it's unlikely to hold elections. Even if it's taken place, it won't solve any existing issues. It may even deepen the conflict.
Jonathan, Tim, Farhad, thanks for joining me. That's all the time we have. And that's all for this edition of Straight Talk with me, Yusuf Aram. If you got any comments, please share them with us on X at Straight Talk TRT. Also, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can find more exclusive content. Until next time, take care and goodbye.